summary, action summary minutes. Okay, I think we have to, it says we must also have activated an item in the current meeting. So let's activate this item here. And so once it's read, it's activated, and see here we can go in and meeting in a meeting.
Like $600–800 million a year. That's what they count as small businesses because they're passed through. Let's look at how sincere they are. Governor Romney on 60 Minutes, I guess it was about 10 days ago, was asked, Governor, you pay 14% on $20 million. Someone making $50,000 pays more than that. Do you think that's fair? He said, oh, yes, that's fair. That's fair. And they're going to talk about, you think these guys are going to go out there and cut those loopholes? The loophole, the biggest loophole they take advantage of is the carried interest loophole and capital gains loophole. They exempt that. Now, there's not enough. The reason why the AEI study, the American Enterprise Institute study, the Tax Policy Center study, the reason they all say it's going to, taxes go up in the middle class, the only way you can find $5 trillion in loopholes is cut the mortgage deduction for middle class people, cut the health care deduction for middle class people, take away their ability to get a tax break to send their kids to college. That's why they arrive.
Is he wrong about that?
He is wrong about that. You can cut tax rates by 20%. And still preserve these important preferences for middle-class taxpayers.
Not mathematically possible.
It is mathematically possible. It's been done before. It's precisely what we're proposing.
It has never been done before.
It's been done a couple of times, actually.
It has never been
Jack
done
Kennedy
before.
lowered tax rates, increased growth. Ronald Reagan.
Now you're Jack Kennedy.
Ronald Reagan. Republicans and Democrats have worked together on this. I understand you guys aren't used to doing bipartisan deals.
But we told each other what we're going to do. When we did it with Reagan, he said, here are the things we're going to cut.
Framework. Let's work together to fill in the details. That's exactly.
Fill in the details.
That's how you get things done. You work with Congress. Look, let me say it this way.
That's coming from the Republican Congress working bipartisanly.
Mitt Romney.
7% rating.
Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts, where 87% of the legislators he served with were Democrats. He didn't demonize them. He didn't demagogue them. He met with those party leaders every week. He reached across the aisle. He didn't compromise principles.
And
he found common ground, and he balanced the budget.
You saw it. If he did such a great job,
he balanced the budget 4 times without raising taxes.
Why isn't he even contesting Massachusetts?
Vice President, what would you suggest beyond raising taxes on the wealthy that would substantially reduce the long-term deficit?
Just let the taxes expire like they're supposed to on those millionaires. We can't afford $800 billion going to people making a minimum of $1 million. They do not need it, Martha. Those 120,000 families make $8 million a year. Middle-class people need the help. Why does my friend cut out the tuition tax credit for them? Why does he go after the child care?
Can you declare anything off limits?
Why do they do that?
Can you declare anything off limits?
Yeah, we're saying close loopholes on high-interest people.
Home mortgage deduction.
For higher-income people. Here.
Can you guarantee that no one making less than $100,000 will have a mortgage deduction impacted?
This taxes a million small businesses. He keeps trying to make you think that it's just some movie star or hedge fund guy or
97% of the small businesses make less than $250,000 a year, would not be affected.
You know it hits a million people. This taxes a million people? A million small businesses?
Does it tax 97% of the American businesses?
It taxes a million small businesses who are our greatest job creators.
I wish I could get it. The greatest job creators.
And you're going to increase the defense budget. And you're going to increase the defense budget.
We're just not going to cut the defense budget like they're proposing.
They said $2 billion.
That's not accurate.
We're talking about so no massive.
No, we're saying
defense increase.
Okay, you want to get into defense now?
Yes, I do.
So
because that's another math question.
Right. Okay.
How do you do that?
So they proposed a $478 billion cut to defense to begin with. Now we have another $500 billion cut to defense that's lurking on the horizon. They insisted upon that cut being involved in the debt negotiations. And so now we have a $1 trillion cut.
Let's put the automatic defense cuts aside.
Okay.
Let's put this aside. No one wants that. But I want to know how you do the math and have this increase in defense
$2 trillion.
You don't cut defense by $1 trillion. That's what we're talking about.
And what national security issues justify an increase?
We're going to cut 80,000 soldiers, 20,000 Marines, 120 cargo planes. We're going to push the Joint Strike Fighter out. We're cutting missile defense.
And one more.
If these cuts go through, our Navy will be the smallest it has been since before World War I. This invites weakness. Look, do we believe in peace through strength? You bet we do. And that means you don't impose these devastating cuts on our military. So we're saying don't cut the military by $1 trillion. Not increase it by $1 trillion. Don't cut it by $1 trillion.
Quickly, Vice President Biden on this.
Look,
I want to move on.
We don't cut it. And I might add, this so-called, I know we don't want to use the fancy word sequester, this automatic cut, that was part of a debt deal that they asked for. And let me tell you what my friend said at a press conference announcing his support of the deal. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, we've been looking for this moment for a long time.
Can I tell you what that meant? We've been looking for bipartisanship for a long time.
And so the bipartisanship is what he voted for, the automatic cuts in defense that they didn't act. And beyond that, they asked for another. Look, the military says we need a smaller, leaner army. We need more special forces. We don't need more M1 tanks. What we need is more UAVs.
Some of the military, I know that's
not some of the military. That was the decision of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, recommended to us and agreed to by the president.
Who answers to a civilian leader?
They made the recommendation first.
Okay, let's move on to Afghanistan.
Can I get into that
I'd like to move on to Afghanistan, please. And that's one of the biggest expenditures this country has made, in dollars and, more importantly, in lives. We just passed the sad milestone of losing 2,000 U.S. troops there in this war. More than 50 of them were killed this year by the very Afghan forces we are trying to help. Now, we've reached the recruiting goal for Afghan forces. We've degraded al-Qaeda. So tell me, why not leave now? What more can we really accomplish? Is it worth more American lives?
We don't want to lose the gains we've gotten. We want to make sure that the Taliban does not come back in and give al-Qaeda a safe haven. We agree with the administration on their 2014 transition. Look, when I think about Afghanistan, I think about the incredible job that our troops have done. You've been there more than the two of us combined. First time I was there in 2002, it was amazing to me what they were facing. When I went to the Arghandab Valley in Kandahar before the surge, I sat down with a young private in the 82nd from the Menominee Indian Reservation who would tell me what he did every day, and I was in awe. And to see what they had in front of them, and then to go back there in December, to go throughout Helmand with the Marines, to see what they had accomplished, it's nothing short of amazing. What we don't want to do is lose the gains we've gotten. Now, we've disagreed from time to time on a few issues. We would have more likely taken into account the recommendations from our commanders, General Petraeus, Admiral Mullen, on troop levels throughout this year's fighting season. We've been skeptical about negotiations with the Taliban, especially while they're shooting at us. But we want to see the 2014 transition be successful, and that means we want to make sure our commanders have what they need to make sure that it is successful so that this does not once again become a launching pad for terrorists.
Martha, let's keep our eye on the ball. The reason I've been in and out of Afghanistan and Iraq 20 times. I've been up in the Konar Valley. I've been throughout that whole country, mostly in a helicopter and sometimes in a vehicle. The fact is, we went there for one reason, to get those people who killed Americans, al-Qaeda. We've decimated al-Qaeda Central. We have eliminated Osama bin Laden. That was our purpose. And in fact, in the meantime, what we said we would do, we would help train the Afghan military. It's their responsibility to take over their own security. That's why with 49 of our allies in Afghanistan, we've agreed on a gradual drawdown, so we're out of there by the year 2014. My friend and the governor say it's based on conditions, which means it depends. It does not depend for us. It is the responsibility of the Afghans to take care of their own security. We have trained over 315,000, mostly without incident. There have been more than 24 cases of green on blue where Americans have been killed. If we do not, if the measures the military has taken do not take hold, we will not go on joint patrols. We will not train in the field. We'll only train in the Army bases that exist there. But we are leaving. We are leaving in 2014. period. And in the process, we're going to be saving over the next 10 years another $800 billion. We've been in this war for over a decade. The primary objective is almost completed. Now all we're doing is putting the Kabul government in a position to be able to maintain their own security. It's their responsibility, not America's.
What conditions could justify staying, Congressman Ryan?
We don't want to stay. We want, look, one of my best friends in Janesville, a reservist, is at a forward operating base in eastern Afghanistan right now. Our wives are best friends, our daughters are best friends. I want him and all of our troops to come home as soon and safely as possible. We want to make sure that 2014 is successful. That's why we want to make sure that we give our commanders what they say they need to make it successful. We don't want to extend beyond 2014. That's the point we're making. You know, if it was just this, I feel like we would be able to call this a success, but it's not. What we are witnessing as we turn on our television screens these days is the absolute unraveling of the Obama foreign policy. Problems are growing at home, but problems are growing abroad, but jobs aren't growing here at home.
Let me go back to this. He says we're absolutely leaving in 2014. You're saying that's not an absolute, but you won't talk about what conditions would justify.
Do you know why we say that?
I'd like to
because
know
we
why.
don't want to broadcast to our enemies, put a date on your calendar, wait us out, and then come back.
But you agree with the timeline.
We do agree. We do agree with the timeline and the transition. But what any administration will do in 2013 is assess the situation to see how best to complete this timeline. What we do not want to do
in 2014.
What we do not want to do is give our allies reason to trust us less, and our enemies more. We don't want to embolden our enemies to hold and wait out for us and then take over the country.
Martha, that's a bizarre
That's why we
statement.
want to make sure. No,
that's a
why we
bizarre
want to make
statement
sure that
since
this
49 of our allies, hear me, 49 of our allies signed on to this position.
And we're reading that they want to
49 of our allies said out in 2014. It's the responsibility of the Afghans. We have other responsibilities.
Do you think this timeline, but we have soldiers and Marines, we have Afghan forces murdering our forces over there. The Taliban is, do you think, taking advantage of this timeline?
Well, look, the Taliban, what we found out, and you saw it in Iraq, Martha, unless you set a timeline, Baghdad in the case of Iraq and Kabul in the case of Afghanistan will not step up. They're happy to let us continue to do the job. International security forces do the job. The only way they step up is say, fellas, we're leaving. We've trained you. Step up. Step up.
Let me go back.
That's the only way it works.
Let me go back to the surge troops that we put in there. And you brought this up, Congressman Ryan. I have talked to a lot of troops. I've talked to senior officers who were concerned that the surge troops were pulled out during the fighting season, and some of them saw that as a political move. So can you tell me, Vice President Biden, what was the military reason for bringing those surge troops home before the fighting season ended? The military reason for bringing those, by the way, when the president announced the surge, you'll remember, Martha, he said the surge will be out by the end of the summer. The military said the surge will be out. Nothing political about this. Before the surge occurred, so you be a little straight with me here, too. Before the surge occurred, we said they'll be out by the end of the summer. That's what the military said. The reason for that is... The military follows orders. Trust me, there are people who are concerned about pulling out.
There are people that are concerned, but not the Joint Chiefs. That was their recommendation in the Oval Office to the President of the United States of America. I sat there. I'm sure you'll find someone who disagrees with the Pentagon. I'm positive you'll find that within the military. But that's not the case here. And secondly, the reason why the military said that is you cannot wait and have a cliff. It takes, months and months and months to draw down forces.
Let me try and illustrate the issue here, because I think this can get a little confusing. We've all met with General Allen and General Scaparrotti in Afghanistan to talk about fighting seasons. Here's the way it works. The mountain passes fill in with snow. The Taliban and the terrorists and the Haqqani and the Quetta Shura come over from Pakistan to fight our men and women. When it fills in with snow, they can't do it. That's what we call fighting seasons. In the warm months, fighting gets really high. In the winter, it goes down. And so when Admiral Mullen and General Petraeus came to Congress and said, if you pull these people out before the fighting season is end, it puts people more at risk. That's the problem. Yes, we drew 22,000 troops down last month, but the remaining troops that are there, who still have the same mission to prosecute, counterinsurgency, are doing it with fewer people. That makes them less safe. We're sending fewer people out in all these hot spots to do the same job that they were supposed to do a month ago.
Because we
but we
turned
took 22,000 people out for them to do
over to the Afghan troops we trained. No one got pulled out that didn't get filled in by trained Afghan personnel. And he's conflating two issues. The fighting season that Petraeus was talking about and Admiral Mullen was the fighting season this spring. That's what he was talking about. We did not pull them out.
The calendar works the same every year.
It does work the same every year.
And spring, summer, fall. It's warm or it's not. They're still fighting us. They're still coming over the passes. They're still coming in to Zabul, to Kunar, to all of these areas. But we are sending fewer people to the front to fight them. And that's right,
because that's the Afghan responsibility. We've trained them.
Not in the East.
Let's move to another war.
Not in the East.
RC East,
most dangerous place in the world.
That's why we don't want to send fewer people to the job.
That's why we should send Americans in to do the job instead of the... You'd rather Americans be going in and doing the job instead of the
We are already sending Americans to do the job, but fewer of them. That's
right. We're sending in more Afghans to do the job. Afghans to do the job.
Let's move to another war, the civil war in Syria, where there are estimates that more than 25,000, 30,000 people have now been killed. In March of last year, President Obama explained the military action taken in Libya by saying it was in the national interest to go in and prevent further massacres from occurring there. So why doesn't the same logic apply in Syria?
It's a different country. It's a different country. It is 5 times as large geographically. It has 1/5 the population, that is Libya, 1/5 the population, 5 times as large geographically. It's in a part of the world where you're not going to see whatever would come from that war. It seep into a regional war. You are in a country that is heavily populated in the midst of the most dangerous area in the world. And in fact, if in fact it blows up and the wrong people gain control, it's going to have impact on the entire region, causing potentially regional wars. We are working hand in glove with the Turks, with the Jordanians, with the Saudis, and with all the people in the region, attempting to identify the people who deserve the help so that when Assad goes, and he will go, there will be a legitimate government that follows on, not an al-Qaeda-sponsored government that follows on. And all this loose talk of my friend Governor Romney and the
Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order of the City of Capitola City Council for October 11th. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Harlan. Here. Councilmember Norton.
Here.
Councilmember Nichol.
Here.
Councilmember Story.
Here.
Mayor Termini.
Here. Would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight, the first order of business, it is my great pleasure to be able to present a proclamation to my friends from the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz County. I see Lance in the audience, and why don't we all come on up? Seal? By the way, that's your camera. This is the big time. This is your mark. It's your mark. This is your mark. Take the time to read this whole thing because it's important. Whereas in winter of 1982, Santa Cruz County experienced devastating storms, leaving much devastation and need in the community to recover from the results of the storm. And whereas a group of community leaders committed to the future well-being of the county's residents came together to create a nonprofit organization which would collect and disperse funds to help during natural disasters and provide resources to the needy, not only during times of disaster, but also making Santa Cruz County a better place to live. And whereas the mission of Community Foundation Santa Cruz County is to promote philanthropy in order to make all of Santa Cruz County a better place to live now and in the future, and whereas the founding board of directors was counseled that a county the size of Santa Cruz could never support the level of local giving necessary to grow a community foundation, whereas through the generosity of local residents, the Community Foundation has grown to assets of over $50 million, managing over 300 donor funds. And whereas from 1982 through 2011, the Community Foundation has dispersed $56.7 million in grants, scholarships, and fund holder awards to nonprofits, including community groups within the city's jurisdiction. And whereas the Community Foundation is led by a local board of directors whose membership represents, knows, and cares about the city of Capitola, and whereas the Community Foundation continues to provide local residents with charitable giving options to help them support the causes they care about, whereas 2012 marks the 30th anniversary of the founding of Community Foundation Santa Cruz County, and is deserving of public recognition. Now therefore be it resolved that the members of the City Council of the City of Capitola, the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz County, is commended and applauded for 30 years of service to the people of the City of Capitola and all of Santa Cruz County, and we convey our sincerest thanks and unqualified support for its continued growth. Seal.
We're very honored and pleased to be here tonight, and having come here as a result of the 1989 disaster to the city of Santa Cruz, and being the beneficiary of the foundation's donor participation, I appreciate the value of the Community Foundation, and am pleased to, as I say, be here representing them. And I'll let Lance say a couple of words too.
Thanks, Seal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members. I think our proclamation does detail our history fairly well, but our history, the past is only a piece of a community foundation. We really look toward the future. Our business model is to be here forever. Very few people live in Santa Cruz County. Probably nobody lives in Capitola because they have to. People make a choice to live here, and when you do, you invest a lot of your time, a lot of your energy, a lot of your thought, a lot of your hopes. And yes, also you invest in your dreams. When you make your estate plan, you have choices. Your assets go one of three places, or two of three places. They go to your heirs, they go to the government, or they go to charity. You have to pick two of those things. And what we'd like to do is engage everybody when they think about all the hard work they did to build assets in their own life, and and the good fortune they've had, think about what will happen. Take a moment and think about what will happen when you're gone, and who can benefit from your own generosity and what you care about. And we can help you, whether it's a large thing like helping kids, helping the environment, or a specific agency. We're here to help. So we'll be here for good. We'll be here forever. Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
Always fun.
I might add that I have had the opportunity to watch firsthand the workings of the Community Foundation from inside, and it's just remarkable exactly how much they do. We will now have a report in the closed session. John?
Thank you, Mayor Termini. The items that the Council discussed in closed session this evening are listed on pages 1 and 2 of the city's posted agenda in the lobby. The Council had 3 items scheduled for discussion pertaining to anticipated litigation. That's the City of Capitola insurance coverage claim against Lexington Insurance Company, which is now an actual lawsuit. The anticipated litigation between the city and the county over responsibility for the Noble Gulch pipe failure in March of 2010, and also litigation concerning the Pacific Cove Mobile Home Park closure, which is also now actual litigation. The Council heard from the City Attorney and the City Manager with respect to these 3 items and received status reports and took no reportable action in closed session. There was an item scheduled for discussion about potential negotiations concerning the gym on the New Brighton School property at 250 Washburn Avenue, but due to time constraints, we did not discuss that item in closed session this evening. And finally, the Council also discussed, in the context of the other pipe failure related litigation, the 7 pending lawsuits against the city from third parties for damage their property sustained during the March 2010 pipe failure incident. And again, the Council received a status report from the City Manager and the City Attorney concerning those 7 cases, but took no reportable action in closed session. And that's the end of my oral report.
Thank you, John. We'll move on to public comments. Anyone who would like to address the Council on items that are not on this evening's agenda, please step forward. May I have a timekeeper, please? Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Russell, and I serve as a member of the Capitola Commission on the Environment, and I'm here this evening representing the Commission. I just wanted to bring to the attention of everyone, both on the TV audience and in this room, that we've started a lecture series on sustainability, and we have our first lecture workshop coming up on Tuesday, October 30th from 7 to 8:30, and it's going to be held in this room, and it's free. The focus of this first of a 4-lecture series is on climate action planning. We're looking at it from a regional level, an individual level, a community level, and we're really hoping that we can have as many folks come and participate in this workshop. We will be having Ross Clark with the City of Santa Cruz, who is their Climate Action Manager, talking about the plan that they've developed. Lacey Rake from the University of California, Santa Cruz, who's working on the university's Climate Action Plan, will be speaking about what they've done. And I will be speaking about what AMBAG, through the AMBAG Energy Watch and Climate Action Programs, has done in the region, and also working with the City of Capitola. And we'll be having computers set up so people can join the Cool Climate Network and be able to have a way of start participating themselves in doing greenhouse gas reductions. Again, I'll just say the date is Tuesday, October 30th from 7 to 8:30 here, and it's at no cost to anyone. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the Council? Hello, Marilyn.
Hello. Marilyn Garrett, part of Wireless Radiation Alert Network. And we look to elected officials to protect the public health and well-being. And I understand how difficult that is when in actuality the corporations have more power than we do and rule. We need to have power in our hands, the people, not the corporations. And I come to you because of the health hazard, the health crisis posed by microwave radiation from the telecommunications industry. And this technology actually proliferated out of World War II radar. And I think I gave you the article, Why Our World is Electropolluted by Helgi Ferry. Had a lot of insight where he said, when something is invented and used by the military, we're sure it's effective and lethal. And industrial capitalists have a way of repackaging these products so they appear beneficial, but the lethal properties remain. And that's how it is with the wireless microwave technology. Here's an excerpt from a book written almost 30 years ago, The Electromagnetic Man, Health and Hazard in the Electrical Environment, by Cyril W. Smith and Simon Beth. Beware, Military at Work, from Chapter 10. The nature and progress of research in this area, that is, research into electromagnetic field effects, has been and continues to be strongly influenced by military interest and involvement. Considerable evidence has been amassed, much of it presented by Paul Brodeur in 1977, that the U.S. military, in particular, has deceived committees, delayed safety standards, denigrated opponents, and damaged health of its own personnel and citizens in its urge to protect its interests, to develop microwave and other non-ionizing radiation weapon systems. So this technology is actually wireless is microwave radiation weaponry. And we need to be cognizant of that and halt its use. It's causing functional impairment in all life, including bees. I will leave you with a very recent article from last month from the Ecologist magazine of England titled, Is Your Smartphone Damaging Your Health? Behind the profit-fueled rise of smartphones and tablets, microwave pollution is a serious assault on health. And again,
Thank you, Marilyn.
I urge you to halt this proliferation.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the council? Welcome, Ed.
Hi, Mayor Termini, members of the City Council. I just want to take a couple of minutes to acknowledge and support you for placing Measure O on the ballot. I know it's a strong move you had to take, and I know that the reason you do that is for the best interest for the citizens of Capitola. I think it's important that we acknowledge that it's not an easy job that you have, and that in the past couple of years dealing with rent control, the flood, and the recession, it's put a heavy burden on the city to make ends meet. We have an opportunity right now, because you have taken the initiative to put Measure O on the ballot, to expedite and put some additional funds into our revenue. I know and I trust that if those funds are collected, we're going to use those funds to build up our reserves, to repair our roads, and to make some improvements that the City of Capitola residents will see. So again, I want to encourage the residents of Capitola that to support this measure, to realize that the funds that are collected for this measure solely go to the City of Capitola. There's other measures that are on the ballot that they may vote for or may be voted by other people that we may see none of that revenue. So again, forget about the things that have happened in the past, or try to put them in perspective. I think that's the important thing. You may not forget about them, but put them in perspective and realize we're trying to move forward. The money will be invested into the City of Capitola, and you will see some benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Sandy. You know, your sign, Sandy, your sign's bigger than Ed's sign. I think. I just
sign from Chris Kirby at Sideways, if you'd like to have one. And I'll put in a plug for her. My name is Sandy Erickson.
I have time started, please.
Still live in Capitola.
And I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Mayor and council members. First off, I have to commend the chief. Unfortunately, I had reason to have a contact with the Capitola Police. And that is because somebody in our fine community is stooping to the low of stealing political signs. I've had 2 of those beauties taken. It's good for Chris's business, but I think it's an embarrassment to the community. And so I'm sorry to say that somebody's doing that. I am glad to say, though, they have not stolen the shirt off my back. And
I would hate to be the person who attempted that.
Tried that. So just, there's a couple things. And, I'm not running for office. I'm running for the citizens. And I'm trying to call their attention to this sales tax increase. And I know when Mr. Statler pitched his talents to you, and I think it was September of 2011, he said, you hire me, and for $5,000 or less, I'll produce you some kind of cash management program to tell you what your cash position is on every quarter. And I wonder if we've gotten that, and if we have, where it's published. I know that prior to the last council meeting, I called and asked what was the city's total indebtedness. And then I posed that question to Mr. Statler at the meeting last time. And it took them 4 days to get back to me and to tell me what the total indebtedness and the service on that debt was. Now, I think with a $300,000 accounting package and a $120,000 a year finance manager, that is something that somebody ought to be able to call and have them open a page and say, this is it on the spot. So I've been walking around talking to my neighbors, and I think people really are starting to pay attention. And they noticed that you spent $700,000 plus on entombing the Rispin Mansion, which we have fought over for a long time. And so I am encouraging folks to continue to pay attention. And I know that the money you say is going to go to Capitola, but you have come to us time after time. And while we must look forward, if we don't look back, we are doomed to repeat the insane mistakes of the past. So I think there's still time for some of y'all to rise up and say, we've taxed our citizens enough. I'm not going to hold out for that, but I am again going to encourage everybody to join me. Hope nobody else steals my signs. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Sandy. And I will tell you that, defacing political signs is the lowest form of rhetoric in political discourse. And I am just glad that we had the money to have a police department at your disposal to make your complaint to.
Uh-huh. You know why? They are such a deterrent. Nobody robs our banks. Nobody robs our subways, but they will steal our signs.
Yes, they will. Thank you. We'll move on to the consent. Oh, I'm sorry. Council comments.
Go Giants.
Okay.
And I have a brief AMBAG report from last night. I have the AMBAG monthly newsletter that I'll pass around with an article, the new article that they have highlighting a city in each issue, and this is highlighting the beautiful city of San Juan Bautista. So actually, it's a nice newsletter. We met last night in the beautiful Marina Library, which if you're ever down there that way, I encourage you to go see. It's absolutely beautiful. Lots of people. It was absolutely full. We received our committee reports, and we've hired 2 new planners. One is going to be doing strictly GIS, and other will be doing other planning. And they have 2 other planning openings that they will be hiring for in the near future. And we had a report on an amendment to the 2010 Metropolitan Transportation Plan that we have to rubber stamp. And it's already been decided by the Transportation Commission of Monterey County, and we talked about a plan for a new 4-lane widening of Route 156, which if you've ever been down to Castroville and tried to drive over to 101 to Prunedale, it's only 2 lanes, so they want to widen it to 4. So we had an interesting discussion. They had saved money on the Prunedale project to put into part of this, so that's good. But otherwise, no other big announcements there last night.
Thank you. Dennis.
Go A's. They're playing right now. Somebody could give us an update in a little while. Speaking of political signs, there's an illegal political sign on the handrail on city property as you come down Wharf Road. I'm hoping that Public Works or police department will take care of that.
Okay. Thank you. Kirby? Anything?
I have nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Sam?
Nothing to report.
I have a couple of questions, and it's for Steve Jesberg. Hey, Steve. Nice tie.
Thank you. Go Giants.
Got it. I've been informed by several of our early morning walkers around Jade Street that the Jade Street parking lot lights are never on, and there's no street lights in that area either. And maybe we could take a look and see if there's a time clock problem or...
Absolutely. Probably a time clock problem.
Probably a time clock. And also, I never realized this as many times as I'm on it, but the Kennedy frontage road from Capitola Pump to the Corp Yard,
yes,
there's no posted speed limit on that road. And because of that, people can rightfully go 55 miles an hour.
That is incorrect.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Give me some new information.
Prima facie speed on a road of that width is 25 miles per hour, so police officers could cite for anybody going over 25 out there. We will be placing, I got the same email today, we will be placing speed limit signs at both ends of Kennedy in the next couple days. But
Great.
The speed limit is not 55 there, it is 25.
And remember, there is a purveyor of fine alcoholic beverages now on that street. So I'm sure the police have found that as a new fishing grounds. Thank you. Mr. City Manager, I'd like to request at a future meeting that you could give us a definitive report on the status of council members and their inclusion into the state retirement program. It's always been my understanding that we were required to from the first day I received a paycheck from Capitola, small as it might have been. But there's been talk around town that says that it's always been optional. I've never found it to be optional. Maybe you can tell us what Watsonville, Scotts Valley, and Santa Cruz does at a future meeting, and also tell us the basis for it being mandatory. Stephanie.
The Chamber's having a mixer next week on Thursday, the 18th, from 5 to 7 at the AAA office. And I was in that office yesterday, and they have flyers. They are very excited. They said this is the first time they've ever had any kind of a public reception. So I said, well, it's a new beginning. So I said, it's great. That's wonderful. So it should be fun.
Also, I'd like to wish our city treasurer well. I think Jacques Bertrand is still in the hospital fighting off an infection, and hopefully he's back with us soon. We'll now move on to the consent calendar, which we usually take as a single item. Would anyone in the audience like to pull any of the items on the consent calendar? Any of the council members or staff like to pull any items?
Move approval of the consent calendar,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item B, but we can discuss that right now.
Okay, do you want to ask a question about B?
Yes.
Let's do that. Do we have a second on the consent?
Motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, but question on B?
Yes. For years we talked about the parking hours in the village. And discussions I've had with a number of the merchants, they seem to be receptive to actually changing it to 3 hours instead of 2. I'd like to have staff bring that back as a discussion for changing the village parking hours from 2 hours to 3 hours. And other than that, I have no question. I give it up on the thought of merchants staying open.
Okay. And that's 3 hours year-round you want the report on, as opposed to just during the season.
Christmas.
So my motion to approve the consent calendar would incorporate Councilman Norton's comment.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All pass. Moving on to general government. We will go on to conceptual review to amend Section 16.68 of the Capitola Municipal Code pertaining to condominium and community apartment conversions. Councilmember Norton?
I'll have to excuse myself from this.
Let everybody know why. So,
because I have done work for one of the owners of one of these apartment buildings.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff.
Good evening. So, just to give you a little feedback in terms of conceptual review, the whole purpose of, because we don't get these too often, so I thought just to give you an idea. Basically, it's there's a conceptual review application that provides the applicant, where that council can provide the applicant with early feedback and direction on complex projects or policy issues. So this is what's before you. Basically, there's no action that needs to be taken, and depending upon the feedback, the applicant can follow up with a formal application. So that's what we're talking about tonight. And in terms of a little bit of background, what we're talking about is the Condo Conversion Ordinance, which was adopted in 1979. The purpose of the ordinance was to ensure balance of rental and ownership housing, provide a variety of housing choices, maintain a supply of low and moderate income housing. It basically limits the conversion of structures built to between 1970 and 1979 when the ordinance was adopted. As far as staff is aware, there have not been any conversions under the ordinance since 1979. So we have not received any applications or approved any. So what the applicant is proposing as part of this conceptual application is a couple of small changes. One is just basically updating the ordinance to define community apartment and stock cooperative and tenants, and include tenant in common, which is not currently in the ordinance. And then the main focus of the amendment is expanding the limitations of what structures can qualify for conversion. So, like I said, currently it's between January 1st, 1970 and the adoption of the ordinance. This would permit structures pre-1970 that have 10 or more units and have a tenants in common arrangement. So in terms of tenants in common, they're arrangements where two or more individuals each own an undivided percentage of property. They cannot be regulated by local governments as they're outside of the Subdivision Map Act. And since they can't be regulated, it's really difficult to determine how many actually exist in Capitola today. The two obvious ones, which I listed here because they're part of the application, is the 101 Grand Crest Apartments, which is a 19-unit apartment complex, and then at 106 Grand, which is the Antigua Apartments, which is 15 units. So looking at our current housing balance, based on our 2010 census right now, we currently have a 46.5% owner-occupied units and 53.5% renter-occupied units. So we have a fairly good balance here in Capitola at the moment. So with the ordinance amendment as currently proposed, other TICs conform, and the number of apartments that could be converted to condominiums could increase. Staff looking at this, thought maybe there's, just to throw out some recommendations that could potentially control the number of conversions. A couple of these recommendations might be limiting the number of conversions to a specific number each year, similar to San Francisco where they kind of have a lottery system every year. That's a possibility. Increasing the in lieu fees for conversions to mitigate the loss of affordable housing. That's another potential option. Another thing also, just in discussing amendments to this, since there is just a limitation from 1970 to 79, it seems that time frame seems a little arbitrary. Exactly, thank you. So should the council support this, we would recommend maybe eliminating that and just have it be prior to 1979, which is the adoption of the ordinance. Another issue that comes up with this is affordable housing. As part of a condo conversion ordinance, and our inclusionary ordinance requires that 15% of the housing units be affordable. This is another thing that staff has discussed, and because of limitations on resources here and staffing, we would have the council consider amending the inclusionary ordinance at the same time if they were to move forward with the amending of the condo conversion ordinance, basically to require just in lieu fees instead of providing units, and then also the possibility of increasing those fees. So certainly there's no denying that the current condo conversion ordinance is fairly antiquated, and while the proposed changes to the ordinance may not have a significant effect on the housing balance right now, the timing of it is a little awkward as we're currently in the middle of our general plan update, and that will include both a zoning ordinance and applicable municipal code sections such as the condo conversion ordinance. So since the proposed amendment would involve an amendment to the general plan, specifically the housing element and the local coastal plan, staff thinks it may be prudent to fold this amendment into the general plan update process. So I'm available for any questions.
Questions of staff? Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. On that last point, Ryan, prudent to hold, prudent, why? What would be gained by waiting to do it with the general plan?
Well, I mean, we're right in the middle of a general plan process. We are going to be looking at the condo conversion ordinance, the inclusionary ordinance, the whole zoning ordinance as a whole as we're going through this process. So separating out an individual application just to do an amendment where we're going to be having to do, amend the existing housing element and the existing general plan, it seems it would be easier just to fold it in and do it as we're going along with the general plan process as opposed to doing it as a separate process.
So it's just a workload issue?
There is a secondary issue that I think that deserves mention is that the amendments to the housing element and amendments to the local coastal plan require approval by state HCD and the state coastal commission. So the workload issue is obviously one consideration, but in addition, we're going to be dealing with oversight and regulatory bodies and forwarding potentially more comprehensive changes to our general plan and local coastal plan, and this coming right at the same time potentially could be awkward. I think that's the point that we were trying to make.
If we were to wait, how long of a time period would we be talking about?
Maybe I can help with that question. In my estimation, right now we're looking at having our new general plan and our new zoning regulations before the council for approval the end of 2013. And if you started this process right now, your timing is not going to be much closer to that. You may save maybe 6 months at the most, but as the city manager mentioned, one of the things that we're going to have to do is amend our housing element, which means you're going to have to go through a whole new recertification process on your housing element. And it's going to raise a lot of issues related to other housing programs that were previously paid for by your redevelopment agency, that now there's going to have to be some new source of revenue for some of those programs if we're going to continue to keep them in there. So I think the city manager is right. You want to do this as one comprehensive change to your general plan, particularly your housing element. There could be some disadvantages to pulling that out right now when you're going to be looking at the whole general plan.
Okay, thank you. If I had on the our inclusionary ordinance, it was my understanding that that the ability for the developer to either have set-asides or to pay the in lieu fee was an option on their choice. They could pick one or the other.
I don't think that's the case. I think the way it reads is that for 7 or more units, they have to provide 15%, and then anything under less than seven units, you would pay an in lieu fee. Anything 7 or more, you would have to provide 15% of the units. And then if there's any type of extra percentage, then they would pay that in lieu fees.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Does our general plan on the our housing stock and between owner-occupied and rentals, is the general plan making any statements about what our objectives or goals are going to be with respect to that allocation?
In your current housing element, what it says is that you are going to preserve the rental housing stock that you have. It's my expectation in your new general plan, the wording is going to be a little more general and talk about having a balance between owner-occupied unit and housing. And I did, yeah.
It won't be any more specific than that? Just, it'll say having a balance, but not defining what that balance is?
Having a sort of 50-50% ratio between rental and owner, which is close to what you have right now in Capitola.
Right. And one last question, if I may, Mayor. The proposed ordinance change, Section B, requires that this would apply only to units of or properties of 10 units or more. What was the rationale for that particular number?
The applicant might be able to speak to that more clearly, but I believe it kind of closes down on or reduces the number of properties that would qualify for a conversion.
But qualifying the larger units means you have more conversions potentially taking place. If you set the range for anything above 10, do we know how many projects we have that are that would fit within this? Are there just the two that are identified here?
Yeah. We don't know. I'm sure there are more, but unfortunately we weren't able to get that data.
We have had several other large projects, the Corinthian Apartments, I believe, which are on Capitola Road, talked to us about trying to convert. There have been others that have come forward.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Kirby.
I'm just curious about the applicant's rationale for pegging at the pre-1970 as opposed to the 1979. Do we have any
I think they just were looking at doing just minor amendments to the code and as opposed to changing it drastically. So I think they want to just keep it at the pre-1970, and I think that's the case.
Okay, thank you.
Susan. Yes. I need the voice of history.
Yes.
Why in the world did we ever do this? I mean, I know preserving the housing stock, but was there more involved?
There was more involved. In this time period, when this was adopted, the late 70s, early 80s, there were numerous condominium conversions taking place all over the state of California, not just in Capitola. And this was prior to there being any lawsuits or anything by condominium owners about units not meeting certain building standards. And so it was a very profitable thing to have happen, and in Capitola there were starting to be a number of those. The largest one that went through is the one that's up on Clare Street, Villas of Capitola, which I think is 100 and something units was converted to condominiums. And at the time that happened, there was some anxiety on the part of the city and the city council that something be done to preserve the affordable housing that Capitola had as far as rental housing. So the condominium conversion ordinance was adopted, and the 1970 date came from the building official at that point in time, who felt that units that were built before 1970 didn't meet the standards that were needed for condominiums. And obviously after 1979, if you were going to build a condominium, then you applied to build a condominium. You didn't come to the city to do a rental project and then try and convert it.
And Susan, this would, if we decided to do this apart from the general plan, a little more expeditiously than December of 2013, would that still have to go forward to the Coastal Commission?
It has to go.
Or is it only appealable to the Coastal Commission?
No, we have to amend our local coastal plan, and we also have to amend our general plan. You have to amend your housing element. And I might mention that the current housing element not only requires the 15%, but an additional 20% be affordable. So for something like the Crest Apartments, you're looking at 35% of their units being affordable if they go forward with a condominium conversion right now, unless we go through this process to do all of these amendments.
And Susan, do we necessarily have to have set-aside units for affordability? Can we just have in lieu fees, period?
Well, if you wanted to have in lieu fees, you could do that, but again, you have to go through this process of amending your general plan, amending those sections of the zoning ordinance. And personally, I think the city needs to amend both its condominium conversion ordinance and its inclusionary housing, because experience has shown us that we need to make modifications to those to allow perhaps projects like the Crest Apartments or Antiguas to become condominiums. It's just as Mr. Bain mentioned to you in his staff presentation, the timing's awkward on this. It's not that staff's saying, no, we don't think you should do this. We just think that we're trying to get the general plan done. The more you pull us away from doing the general plan and doing these individual little projects, the more it slows us down on getting to our end goal, which is really going to help everyone, and I think potentially is going to allow the applicants to ultimately do what they want to do anyway.
I only asked you that because it seems like when you mentioned the RDA in our housing program, that being able to do condo conversions and have in lieu fees only might preserve what has been a very, very successful housing plan in Capitola, which accounted for our good mix of rentals.
And I think as far as city policy goes, you would rather see an in lieu. I mean, you have to ask yourself, and I'll use the Crest Apartment as an example, is that really the appropriate place to try and have all of these affordable units, or would you be better off amending it all so you had an appropriate in lieu fee which would allow you to provide those units, even more units in other parts of Capitola?
Thank you. And question for Ryan. As I read through this, I got the idea, and don't take this wrong, this is not a criticism. It felt like we were letting an applicant write a new ordinance for us. Or was it just we thought the ordinance fitting into what the applicant was looking for? I just had an uneasy feeling.
No. Oh.
So, well, we're all here tonight.
Good.
Ryan did a fabulous job while I was gone working on all this and putting it together.
This is true.
I think that the applicant, Mr. Eady's working for his applicants, is trying to look for a way to make this happen as quickly as possible. So I think he was trying to provide us with some ideas and options that he thought might work.
Okay, thank you. Kirby.
I have a question for council. Is 1970 the date of the adoption of the Subdivision Map Act?
No, the Subdivision Map Act, I believe, predates 1970. I don't have it in front of me. Do you have the year for?
I didn't bring it with me, actually. I'm sorry. I had it.
67? 57?
57.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes,
Also,
70.
one concern at that time, those apartments on Claire's were called Las Flores Apartments. And they were very nice, affordable apartments with lovely swimming pools, and they were full. And the applicant wanted to turn them into condominiums. There was a problem, I think, with the floor and noise. And I think the city at the time, allowing the condominium conversion, said you have to upgrade. Because if people are going to buy these, they're going to want to have it a little quieter. And so I think there was some remodeling that was done at that time that was required by the city. And they were very lovely condominiums to buy for affordable housing at that time. But those were the famous Las Flores Apartments.
Great, thank you. I'm going to open this up to the public. Anyone from the public who would like to address the council on this item, please step forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Charlie Eady, representing the property owners that the properties mentioned. There's a number of things that came up which I'd like to respond to. And first of all, I appreciate the idea of this conceptual review, and I think what we're trying to do here, as Susan mentioned, is to see if we can move something forward that's minor, that's simple, that's quick. It doesn't approve any condominium conversion or anything like that. It just allows the process to start, and it would still require the applicants to eventually meet all of your standards and so on. And I think the one important element of this is that the world has changed. There weren't tenant and common ownerships back at the time that your previous ordinance was done. And so the fact of this question, are apartments converting to ownership or not, when it's a tenants in common, it's actually an ownership conversion that's not regulated by the city. So if you change your ordinance, you'll actually, to allow some of these to happen, you would actually retain all of your control. You can still say no, but you would also potentially bring properties up to higher standards, to your own standards. Now, a couple of things have come up. One is the timing. Why do this now? Okay, the general plan's right around the corner, and I totally get that. Our feeling is that I don't think anybody in the staff has been able to guarantee that they'll be done by the end of 2013. And I've been involved in a lot of general plan processes over the years and zoning ordinance processes, and they tend to go longer than you think. And I'm sure it's possible to meet that, but if we can do something right away and get some of the benefits going, at least begin the conversation, we'd be really happy to do that. Now, what is, the other thing about why now is, maybe it's only going to save us a year or 2 years or whatever it is, but the fact of the matter is, the sooner the better, just because there's a dynamic situation in the housing market, and right now we have really low interest rates. It's a moment of opportunity that may or may not be around in a year or 2 years or whenever it is that the zoning ordinance comes around. And further, I think the whole big package is going to take a whole lot longer, because even if you get it at the end of 2013, you've still got all these other processes to go through, and when it's a big package, those packages take a lot longer than a minor amendment that just gets done every quarter and submitted, if it has to be submitted at all. Now, I actually, this whole question of the general plan amendment, I've had a discussion with Jamie and Susan about this, and I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that you actually don't need to amend the general plan. And I didn't think we were going to have this discussion here tonight, and there wasn't any detail in the staff report. But basically, the housing element has that general statement that Susan mentioned about preserving, the rental stock, and it makes reference in Program 2H to the condominium conversion ordinance, which exists now. And it does reference that the condo conversion ordinance does require the 35% set aside. Now what happens, though, is if you go into the ordinance itself, you see that it has some language that says things like, when it comes to the affordable housing provision, it says the council shall consider. So it's a little bit tricky on the language, and I'm sorry we don't have all of this to go through with you, but in any case, it's not mandatory, because there's also a provision in the ordinance that allows the council to waive any or all particular elements of the housing question of the affordability in the ordinance. So, it's an interpretation, and your staff is perfectly, at their rights to interpret it, but I'm going to suggest to you that if we do a conceptual review and come back for a further work on this ordinance, we really should have the discussion about the general plan and whether we in fact do need to do an amendment for this minor of a change. My position is that you wouldn't actually have to, because the reference in the housing element is so general, and there is a reference to an ordinance, your condo ordinance, that has flexibility built into it. So again, that's part of the issue. The other thing that came up in the staff report was this question about, why the rationale for the pre-1970. And I think Susan hit it on the head, and Ryan, that we're just taking the wording that you've got now and saying, what's the simplest thing that can be done that's the most minimal change possible that would expand the envelope, so to speak, of potential projects that could be done under this. Now, the other rationale is we've heard concerns, and it's been raised by the staff in the staff report and by others, that, well, this could be, open up the floodgates and there'd be a whole lot of potential for units to come in. And one of the simplest ways to do that is to actually, limit the pool of potential properties that might want to consider doing this. But there's a number of hurdles that properties would have to go through, including getting a TIC, Tenants in Common, approval through the State Department of Real Estate and so on. So it's not an automatic thing in any case. Now, the other thing that I found interesting, if you look at your housing statistics, in 1970 there were something like 2,500 housing units in Capitola, and in 1980 that number went up significantly. It was something on the order of 4,400, 4,300. Your biggest period of growth in housing was between 1970 and 1980. So we don't have any objection if you want to, pick a date. It doesn't matter. You could say any property if you want. Like I said, this is conceptual. We're not wed to any one number, but we were trying to respond to the concern to try to keep it limited. And if you include all the way to 79, you'll actually include a much bigger pool because you almost doubled the housing stock in those 10 years. But again, it's kind of up to you if you want to calibrate this more tightly or more loosely. It's fine either way for us. We just would like the opportunity to try to do something simple and something minimal. I think the other thing that could potentially happen is once you start, there are a lot of things that you might want to change in this ordinance, and it might take a lot longer than just, the package that comes forward with the general plan. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but again, it's kind of an unknown. We feel like you could make a little bit of a change right now. It wouldn't have to be a big deal. It wouldn't even necessarily need to require a general plan amendment. Maybe a change in inclusionary ordinance, but maybe not also for the same reason, because your condo ordinance currently has flexibility built into it. So in terms of the number, I just tried to answer the question that Jamie raised to me, and what's the number that you could potentially get with the ordinance change of the pool. And I, again, went back to the 70 census and did a little, series of analyses derived from the data and looking at the owner, renter, and apartments and so on and so forth. And about as best an estimate as I could come up with, short of going around actually, looking at your building permit records and looking at every property, there might be a pool of somewhere around 300 property units, total units, that could be available to this. Now, there's probably some very small fraction that would even consider doing this, and even then you'd have to have them going through their own process of getting a TIC in place. If you didn't want to have very many applicants at all, you could literally say, as of the such and such a date, if they don't have an approved TIC with the State Department of Real Estate, they do have to wait or whatever. So the point is, you can calibrate it any way you want. Now, in terms of the balance of renter and ownership, I think that's a really important question, and it's a question that, it's a matter of public policy. Now, right now, I think the number was 53 to 47 or something like that. And in 1980, in 2000, it was 47% renter and 41% owner, with the rest vacant or other. In 1970, interestingly enough, it was the other way around. The ratio was 47% owner-occupied and 38% renter-occupied. So you've actually had a shift, fairly substantial one, from an owner-occupied to a renter-occupied. And if you're trying to get to 50-50, then you actually would want to try to do something like this in order to encourage some of these tenant and common ownerships to actually come in and be condominium ownership units. But again, it's one of those things where it's very hard for the city to, really finely tune all that, because so much of this happens in the marketplace in terms of, owner and renter and what's built and so on. And we're only talking about a limited pool of the larger properties in the proposal that we've got. So in summary, I think we have a simple, a reasonable proposal. We also think that if you do this and we can move forward sooner, you could get affordable housing money into your hands earlier. Again, maybe it wouldn't make much difference if you waited 2 years, but then again it might if you wanted to. So what we'd like to do is, test the water. If you want to go forward with this, we'd be happy to work with the staff. They've been very helpful. We'd be very happy to take as little of their time as possible. That's why, we can write the stuff and they can review it, or however you want to do it, just so that it doesn't burden you at all. And then we would, again, come back and put together something that you would be willing to consider, again, as an ordinance as opposed to just a concept at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Would anyone else like to address the council? Susan, did you have something else you'd like to say? Yeah. I'll let you cut off that old guy back there who just tried to get up.
I do that all the time anyway.
I know.
And maybe our city attorney can help me, but I don't think that your zoning ordinance can override what's in your general plan. I think the general plan takes precedent.
Thank you. Nels, did you have something you wanted to tell us?
I do, actually. This is just an observation from the Common Sense Department. Anyone, and I mean anyone, who walks along Capitola Beach and looks up at the Crest Apartments and sees its foundations hanging off the face of the bluff has one thought. When, not if, but when is the next chunk coming down? Come on, you all know it is going to happen. So as I understand, there is an owner of long-standing and presumably informed about the tenuous footing of his real estate, and 19 tenants whose total investment in their apartments is probably a security deposit, first and last month's rent, a few $1,000s tops. Converting the Crest Apartments to condos would ultimately create 19 brand new rosy-eyed property owners, each with an investment of several $100,000. And when that next chunk of the bluff does give away, and a portion or all of the Crest Apartments are condemned, there are going to be 19 pissed-off owners and 19 attorneys out there looking for blood. And you know that the city will be right at the top of their hit list. It already takes it already takes an 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper to list all of the city's litigation. Is it a smart thing to do to expose the city and the citizens to this sort of almost inevitable liability? Where's the benefit to the city? It seems as though the only person that's going to make a bunch of money on this is the landlord. So in the case of that little stretch of Depot Hill right along the raggedy cliff, it seems what you ought to be thinking about to me is some sort of a geologic overlay district that stops any intensification of uses right there on the bluff, and not trying to figure out some way to put 19 more new housing units. So common sense says that you avoid this one like the plague. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nels. Anyone else like to address the council? Popkin, come on up.
I didn't come here to speak. I just came here because I wanted to listen to the city council. But after this gentleman very wisely pointed out the danger of living in the Crest, I think I should really address the city. I bought this thing, my wife and I bought it in 1996 or 97. It was in very bad condition. In fact, the walkway inside for the second floor was creaking, and you couldn't even, it was dangerous to walk. Over the last 15 years, we have spent close to $5 million upgrading not just the inside, with the city's approval and geological with Haruka Sunich, looking at it with all sorts of paleontologists, you name it. We have about 5 or 6 scientists and geologists and looking at it with the city's approval. We have put 51 2-feet piers tying to the foundation on the west side, as well as on the south side, which is the ocean side. In addition to that, we put piers that are almost 35 feet deep, 2 feet diameter, and tied them together with cement, all concrete, all the recommendation of the geologists, which are experts who have done this before. And I think that the city knows all done what proper permits and proper, and not only we had to go to the Coastal Commission to do all this work, and we did it properly, and thank God nobody got hurt during this entire process so far. We have also invested, and like Mr. Edie said, went to the state and got it converted to TIC. So individual ownership is already exists. We felt through some consultation with some of the experts in Capitola, we love Capitola, we've been here over 15 years, and my wife and I put the opera here. And if you remember last year during the storm, the southwest corner, the city had 2 trees that fell down that took a whole chunk of the hill, including one of the best apartments at the corner down. We did not come after the city to repair it. We repaired it on our own. We paid for it, and now it's again with the geological advice from Haruka Sunich. And that hill, if you go over there now, we put all the proper screening and the proper levels and slopes to make sure that it's very well done. I am not a geologist, and I hope we don't have an earthquake. This is earthquake country, and we have earthquake, hopefully protection. I don't know what's going to happen in an earthquake, but we think that all these work that we have done will be good protection for the people. So I want to give you one example from a businessman point of view. You can always talk about general plans, and in my business, whenever you want to do something very general, it takes forever to get it done. Usually you lose money, you never get it done. If Steve Jobs wanted to make the iPhone to be voice sensitive as well as be Wi-Fi sensitive, be the 4G, he would never introduce it 4 years ago. He only introduced it with the touch screen, and you could move with your fingers, and incrementally, and 4 years later, he dominated the smartphone industry. So, to me, progress is done incrementally and slowly. I think, I don't know all the details about the proposal that Mr. Charlie and Ryan worked out, and your city manager, Jamie. Whatever it is that you guys decide, I can live with. It's not an issue. I think that converting it from where we are to TIC to basically condominium gives the city more control. You can upgrade the stuff, will be an example for everybody. I'm willing to invest the money and do it done. Whatever you want to do, you can kick the can further into the future, do nothing, and look for a general plan, maybe 2015 or 16 or never, or make a tough decision and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doug Dodds, one of the owners of the Antigua, and I'm with Popkinen trying to convert our existing ownership units, the TICs. There are already many that are privately owned into condominiums. We think there's some advantages for the city if we come under your auspices. We'll be able to make a significant contribution to the low-income fund based on the in lieu fee. And I think with the current RDA kind of gone away, this is a significant financial impact for the city. The other thing I would like to say is that in addressing the erosion problems with our coastline, at the Antigua we have a seawall that's been in place for at least 8 or 9 years. It's all engineered, and we've experienced no problems since that seawall's been installed. And these properties are going to require more maintenance in the future, and that's another driver for going to ownership, because owners don't mind taking care of their property and protecting it, and we think this could help. And I'd just like to give you those few ideas, and I'm open for any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Doug. Seeing no one else, we will bring this back to the council. There is no recommended action except to discuss and provide some direction to staff. So, Stephanie, you want to start?
Well, I don't have any strong objections to turning these into condominiums, but I don't think it's a good process to do it right away right now when staff is in the middle of their work on the general plan. I would rather see it folded into that process, try to get it done in the next year, and try to make it happen then. But to do this as a specific project and have to go to the Coastal Commission now, and then the Coastal Commission again with another package, seems like not a good use of all of our time and energy.
Thank you. Kirby.
Well, I share my colleagues' thoughts about the conversion of the Antigua and Crest Apartments to condominiums. I don't have a problem with that. The purpose of our ordinance is to preserve affordable housing. It doesn't really specify whether it doesn't matter whether it's owner housing or renter housing. The main thing is that it be affordable housing, and the 34 units at the Crest and Antigua developments are not affordable now, and converting them to condominiums is not going to change that. So there's not going to be any real loss in our affordable housing stock. The driving force behind the application probably has to do with financing, because the TIC ownership mechanism was contrived in the real estate industry as a means of circumventing the Subdivision Map Act, so that it was a cheaper, easier way to convert an apartment house into individual owner-occupied spaces through the vestiture, rather than going through the Subdivision Map Act and everything else that's involved with that. And that's been going on for some time. And the problem with it is that the banks haven't really bought into that. And so it becomes more difficult to transfer a unit that is in a TIC ownership than one that has gone through the more cumbersome, expensive, laborious, bureaucratic Subdivision Map Act process. So, and I understand that, and that's all fine and good, but that's just as an aside. I tend to support the staff concern about the timing of the project. I think it would be prudent to fold it into the city's general plan, and I think I would not be really comfortable with the staff recommendation of trying to control the housing stock and the numbers of future conversions of any kind of apartments, be they TICs or whatever, through a specification of a number of units each year that could happen, because we've seen that process with water meters and so forth, and septic tanks and so forth in the county. That's not really a good way to do it. I think we should find some better way, and I'm not sure if we come up with some kind of in lieu fee for conversions just across the board. I don't know if that really works, because in this case, for example, you would be converting 34 units. It wouldn't have any impact on the affordable housing stock. Why would you penalize them and charge them fees for the conversion to put into a fund to do what with? I mean, it's not like they're doing something that's compromising our housing stock. But by doing that, you also bring into the mix other apartment TIC units that maybe are affordable, and you need to find a way to make a distinction in their treatment. So I think it's a bigger question that can be dealt with quickly. For reasons pointed out by our community development director, I would encourage the staff to move forward with updating our policies and our regulations to allow this kind of conversion in the future. But I think we should be folded into the general plan processing that is ongoing right now for the reasons that were pointed out. So those are my thoughts.
Sam.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. I think there is a general consensus here that the concept is a good one and that we should move forward with it. Certainly a little bit differences of opinion is about the timing of it. And I'll start to speak to that first because I certainly appreciate the interest in waiting till we do our general plan. I guess if we had some assurance that the general plan was actually going to be here on our dais here by the end of 2013, I could maybe take some comfort in waiting. But my experience in sitting up here is that generally things do get delayed. And even once it arrives here, it could take several months. But I appreciate that issue. But looking at the other side of that coin, though, about what is the greater benefit to the potential community and to the potential buyers, and many of them who are maybe TIC occupants currently and the owners of these properties, and the interest to stimulate our housing market, which is a current need. The interest rates are lowest right now. The benefits to potential buyers to be able to buy into these units and to start building equity into these units is now. I just fear that if we wait because of administrative reasons, we could potentially lose that opportunity. We saw that happen with the Rispin project of bureaucratic delays destroying a project potentially. I would certainly like us to weigh those different factors and hopefully find a way to move a little bit quicker and to move, if we were to move incrementally so that we can achieve this particular objective sooner. And then look at the greater questions about the relationships between owner-occupied and rentals and that balance of how much we want to have. I think we should have certain overriding kind of guidelines to guide us in the future and to then have a more maybe expansive look at amending these ordinances. And so what I'm saying is I think move, as the applicant has suggested, incrementally, move quickly to be able to put ourselves in a position to take opportunities. And I also want to address the question, this change is not to approve the conversion of any particular project. We're not approving the Crest Apartments through this action tonight. And I think many of the issues about exposure to liability, I'm not sure what the legal theories would be. If they were, we would have exposure to every project that's along the cliffs in Capitola, but it's not to approve that particular one. I think we can address those issues when we get there. I do have another point about restricting or saying that the inclusionary portion of this ordinance will be limited to fees only. Because, I mean, I think Councilman Kirby made a good question. Well, where are those fees going to be used? What purpose would they be applied? But what strikes me is that if we don't have the current inclusionary, in other words, that part of these conversions or these projects are used or made available to moderate and low-income individuals, they will be shut out of some of the best properties in the city. The ones that we are kind of focused on, the Antigua, it is an ocean view property. why shouldn't moderate and low-income individuals be able to reside there? I would like to see the ability to have that happen. And other projects that do have conversions, I think that we should not just restrict it to having the in lieu fees and then shuffling off our moderate and low income to less desirable locations. And so that's my view about that if that were to come back to us. But overall, I think this is a good, it's kind of a win-win-win. It's a win for the property owner, it's a win for the city, and it's a win for the residents who actually get an opportunity to buy in and build equity in the Capitola housing market. So those are my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I'm generally in favor of the condo conversion. I think that there's bad timing right now because of where we are. And forgive me, Sam, you know, I don't often disagree with you forcefully, but
it's always the first time for everything.
I guess so. You know, the concept that we have to make every possible location available for every income bracket strikes me as ludicrous. I would love to live in Malibu. The fact is, I ain't going to do that any time in my lifetime. There are places that we were able to do more good with the dollars we have, and on the edge of the ocean with a 180-degree view of the Pacific is not an inalienable right of every human being. It is the product of industry. And in that respect, I'm sure Sandy Erickson's cheering for me at home right now.
But I just want to, if I may,
yeah, I have
the inclusionary ordinance already states that it's to be made within the project that's being proposed.
Yes,
so that is
true.
already the case.
I know.
And I don't imagine Malibu has an inclusionary ordinance.
Oh, I check every day. I don't know what you do to make something of that caliber affordable or low income, or what qualifies as a low income house that might ordinarily go for $800,000 or $900,000. Does $600,000 then become affordable? Not for me. I don't know what would happen there, but that's a different conversation. I think that because of the proximity of the general plan, because of my dislike for the whole general plan process, I wouldn't mind seeing the general plan come before us in 2 weeks. Okay? So don't fuss over it too much. Okay? Feel free to bring it to us whenever you want. I just don't think this is the right time, but at the right time, I'm fully in favor of revamping our condo ordinance. So I think you've heard the council's words on this. I don't know that we necessarily need a motion or, you know, a collective idea, but I think you've heard our ideas. Stephanie?
Just one last point. We don't have that 20% set aside from redevelopment anymore. So we're going to have to take a real hard look at our affordable housing program and where we're going to get the cash to have an ongoing sustaining programs there. So I think this money that we could get for allowing this to happen, if we could get some good serious money, we'll put it to good use probably very, very soon afterwards.
As long as we don't put it to good use hiring yet another staff person to head our housing program, I think I'll be very, very happy.
Yeah.
So you've heard what the council had to say, and you know, I think there's a majority of our hearts are with you on this as far as going forth and condoizing, but we have to let the timing roll a little further, and we'll go on to the next item on the agenda and call back the good councilman, Dennis Norton. I'd like to take the time to thank Councilmember Norton for recusing himself and the integrity that requires in fostering transparency in government. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me back into the room.
Oh, we will always let you back into the room. Trust me. Nobody gets out of here alive. Okay. Next item on the agenda, consideration of approving a sole source contract with Bowman and Williams, consulting civil engineers for consulting services related to the Pacific Cove temporary parking lot design in the amount not to exceed $62,468.30, and authorize city manager to execute the agreement. Staff, Steve Jesberg, head of our Public Works Department, will talk to us.
Good evening, Council. Just a quick recap on what has got us here tonight. On July 26th, the Council directed staff to develop a project description and financing options for the development of a parking lot on the full Lower Pacific Cove property. As the property is formerly known as the Pacific Cove Mobile Home Park. And on August 9th, we came back and the Council approved a project description for a 250-space parking lot, authorized solicitation of engineers for design contracts, authorized beginning environmental review. You allocated $75,000 for funding of these two tasks and approved submission of preliminary application to the state I-Bank for funding. Tonight, we're before you to take that first step and award a design contract to Bowman and Williams Engineering out of Santa Cruz for design services. The contract amount is $62,468.30. We're recommending a sole source contract. Our sole source purchasing provisions allow us to award a sole source contract when a professional services have extensive knowledge of and have worked previously on the site. Bowman & Williams designed the Upper Pacific Cove parking lot and has survey data throughout the site. They are the only local firm probably, or one of the only local firms in the area that could do this, and certainly have done work for the city of Capitola over the last probably 50 years. As part of this contract, they have some supplemental survey work that does need to be done under a purchase order issued by the city manager. We have actually authorized that work. Our thought is we're trying to meet the project deadlines that we established at the previous meetings and wanted to get that work going. The survey work, no matter what we decide to do, is something we need to do. We need to get that all the topography in this site figured out, whether we're going to build a park or a parking lot or whatever we're going to do. So we did move forward with that. With approval of the contract tonight, that PO will simply be folded into this contract. So that's included in that $62,000 price. And wanted to mention that the steps here is we will complete the survey work in a 30% design effort before we can go forward with the CEQA review. So that's kind of our goal. We're asking to award the contract for the full amount, which would get us through construction documents. But if there's anything that comes up in the CEQA or anything like that, we would expend it. I think it's $10,000 each for the survey and 30% design review up to that point. That's my report. Have any questions?
Questions of staff? Dennis.
Thank you. We're awarding a sole contract for completion through engineering and to construction of a project that has not been approved by the city. Can we write into the contract that we can suspend this contract or take this contract out at any point?
Yes, certainly. Like all our contracts have a 30-day notice.
Of this contract, Steve, how much of it needs to be done to the point where we go to CEQA hearings?
That would be the survey and the 30% design, which would be about $20,000.
$20,000.
There may be some additional tree work or landscape work that we'd have to do. So, being conservative, I would say $25,000.
So it would be under, let's say, under $30,000 in expenses to get us to the point where we have a presentable plan to the public.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. Okay. Being that we're going to pave over 3-4 acres of Capitola, would it not be in our interest to do this in a environmentally sound manner, meaning that we look for alternatives to the AC paving that it seems to be proposed here? There are different types of surfaces that allow for drainage. There are surfaces that can be still chalked and used in that manner. Could we not have the engineers look at those alternatives? I mean, if we're going to pave over 4 acres of our city, I think we have a responsibility to do this in the most environmentally sound manner that we can do this.
And absolutely. The scope of services in the RFP went out, said that we need to do some analysis of the surfacing that goes in. I did talk with Bowman and Williams about that specific issue today, and the new drainage regulations require us to build as much of the porous concrete or porous paving as we can. So we will look at all of our viable options. I know you sent city manager some, I can't remember the name of it, some alternative to paving. And Bowen Williams has actually used that in some of their projects, and we will certainly include that and use as much of that as we can.
I appreciate that, Steve. Can we keep in the consciousness of this that this is intended to be temporary? I mean, is the engineers that are doing this project looking at this thing as being a 100-year project, or are they looking at it to be a 5-year project?
It's certainly in our project description, we describe it as a 5-year project. It will be functional for 5 years.
Okay.
There's certain things that we need to do. I can't design something that in 5 years is going to fall apart or anything like that. So we need it to be functional for those 5 years. But yeah, we're planning not to do anything that is a 20-year project on this.
Thank you, Steve.
Other questions to staff? Would anyone from the public like to address the council on this item? Please step forward. Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Stephanie.
I think we're all very conscious of the cost of this project, and wherever we can keep it down, I think we want to. Whatever methods we can use, not to cut corners, not to make it look tacky, not to make it look cheap, but just to save money, and so it'll be functional and will work, we'd be very thrilled with.
Kirby, anything to say?
I'm comfortable with the staff recommendation and would move approval.
Second.
Anything further comments, Sam? I would just add that, reinforcing what Dennis said, I'll probably vote for this, and Dennis will probably vote against it, but the temporary nature of this, and that we have to maintain keep our eye on the prize, and I'm very much in favor of this for different reasons than probably other council members are. I'm looking for this project to validate our need for a parking structure. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Go forth and survey. Next item on the agenda is consideration of a resolution rescinding Resolution 3726 and adopting a revised conflict of interest code for the City of Capitola to become effective January 1st, 2013. I must admit, for the simplicity of this, it eluded me why we're doing it. It seems like what we're doing right now.
I second the motion.
So make us smarter.
Okay.
City Clerk, Sue.
What's going on here?
Okay, this is intended, good evening, City Council. This is intended to adopt a revised conflict of interest code. And according to the Political Reform Act, it requires all local governments to review their conflict of interest code every 2 years. And so that's why this is happening, to determine if any amendments are being required. And as you're aware, the code designates individuals required to disclose certain investments or sources of income. So in reviewing the code, which has been reviewed by the city manager, city attorney, and staff, there are four additions, and one is the Administrative Services Director, which was not on the code prior, the Oversight Board for the Capitola Successor Agency, the Maintenance Superintendent, and the successor agency, which is to the former Capitola Redevelopment Agency. So on July 17th, staff sent out a notice of intention to those affected with this amendment, and we received no responses by the September 4th deadline. So the individuals that are always on the code are government code filers 87200, which means city council, planning commissioners, city manager, city attorney, and city treasurer. So staff is just asking for your approval for this resolution to amend the code.
The maintenance supervisor, really, the maintenance supervisor needs to disclose.
Well, he helps in making purchases for the city.
Okay.
Through the Public Works Department.
Okay, and we are the successor agency, so we do this already, right?
Right.
Okay, I just want to get clear. Any questions?
I'll move this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this thorny problem? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We now adjourn the City of Capitola City Council meeting to open the meeting for the City Council of Capitola as successor agency to the former Capitola Redevelopment Agency for October 11th. I never tire of saying that. Noting that all of our members are present, we will go to oral communications. Dennis.
Mr. Mayor, Chairman of the successor agency.
Yes.
Why is it that as a redevelopment director that we were paid $50 a month, that's $10 a week, yet we still have responsibility to review the same work and we're not paid anything? Why is that?
I think Jerry Brown cut our pay without even asking us. And this just falls into the purview of our fine, upstanding public service and volunteerism as staunch members of the community. Do you want to put any other spin on this, Susan, that I haven't?
The law specifically said that you would be unpaid.
Be unpaid?
Yes.
So that doesn't mean we have to pay a lot of attention to it.
Well, no, we have to be just, let me put it this way, we are unpaid, but we have to be just as effective as we always are. You can interpret that the way you will.
It specifically is included in the law that you don't receive any compensation.
All new city council candidates should pay close attention to the fact of what we do for free.
I have no further comment on this matter.
Okay, good. Then we'll go on to our consent calendar, which is consideration of approval of the City of Capitola as successor agency to the former Capitola Redevelopment Agency regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. General government hearings. Receive the Capitola Housing Successor Due Diligence Audit of the Low and Moderate Income Housing Fund as required by the Health and Safety Code, Section 34179.5. Staff. Hi, Tori.
Hello. Attached to the staff report is a copy of the due diligence audit report for the Low Mod Housing Fund. And what that was, it was required based on AB 1484 that both the Low Mod Fund and the regular RDA operating fund have audits prior to the end of this year. This particular audit was due on October 1st. As part of the requirements, we had to bring in an external auditor to take a look at the agreed upon procedures to make sure that we fell within the guidelines, also to look at the transfer of any assets, and in addition to see if there was any residual funds available to the taxing entities. In this particular circumstance, since the city elected to take over the housing successor activities, the only assets that were available were loans which were transferred to the housing successor agency. There was no residual amounts available to the taxing authorities. So basically, the audit just looked at that and said, yes, there is no funds available for the taxing entities. We also had to convene an oversight board hearing on October 3rd and another one which will follow on Friday to vote or approve on the report. Some of the questions that came up during that session was, what did the $3.27 million represent that was transferred to the Housing Successor Agency? We provided them with a list of loan specifics by the parcel numbers and the dollar amounts of what that $3.27 million represented. Another question came up in regards to a second attachment that listed $735,000, which was transferred from the Low Mod Fund to the general fund. These funds were transferred back. Part of the reason was it was related to an agreement that was going into place, and with the release of AB X 126, that agreement was voided, so the Low Mod Fund took those funds back. So the net effect was zero. Another question focused on why in Section 3 there were some comments related to, I believe it was Wharf Manor and Loma Vista. In the comment section, it listed some notes indicating that the payee's name didn't match what was on the enforceable obligation payment schedule. The differences is that it was paid to the payees at that time, but were considered on the enforceable obligation schedule as part of the number 8 item on the recognized obligation schedule. So it was there, it was just a separate payee number at that time. We didn't break it out into that level of detail on the enforceable obligation payment schedule.
Questions of staff? This item came before us in the Oversight Board. It kind of went right through. It was all very understandable, and everyone agreed to it. And we'll be meeting again to do the exact same thing on Friday after we've heard it. So if there are no questions of staff and no one from the audience, the public, who would like to speak to us, I'll entertain a motion to accept the report.
Full of the staff recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I think that wraps up our meeting of the successor agency. Mr. City Manager, do you have any parting words for us tonight?
I do want to talk to you very quickly about smoking regulations. There's been a little bit of scuttlebutt flying around in the internet space about potential smoking regulations. Something you'd like to see in a future agenda coming up?
Well, I've requested it. Our grade from the American Lung Association is woefully low for really administrative purposes, not really the actions we've taken. And I've sent you some information about things we can do. We'd like to hear from the chief at some point about a tobacco license and how that would assist him in his policing of selling to minors. I'd like to hear about codifying the elimination of any smoking products within a certain radius of a school, which we now comply with, but we just have nothing on the books that says so. It's really very simple. And then we might want to also speak about potential smoking regulations in apartments and common space. So I think that's worthy of bringing back. I'm sure it'll come back after the election and after reorganization, but I'm sure that the next and future mayor would probably want to do the same thing.
I think we'll have a lot of interesting topics to talk about at our workshop of things we can work on in the next year.
Yes, January workshop.
Very much money.
No doubt. I cringe at the idea of Marin's smoking regulation, and I will never want to be that much of a nanny state. But certainly we need to pay attention to the needs of our public. Yes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Earlier in tonight's proceedings, we had a response to a flurry of emails that we all received on the Kennedy Drive speed limit or lack thereof, and I was really impressed and proud to live in a small community where a few emails timely placed can actually generate a really quick solution, just bang, bang. I mean, that is really pretty cool. Don't try that in Boston or New York or Manila or any place like that. We also have received this week a number of emails from people who were rudely awakened earlier than they thought this past weekend because of an event that was held down in the village, and I'd like someone from the staff, either the chief of police or the city manager, to inform the public how we have responded to that.
Because they did, in fact, violate their permit, and we recognize that, and the chief was right on that. Hi, Chief. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Rudy Escalante, Chief of Police. Yes, we did receive the complaints regarding that, and I have looked into it. The applicant had actually, when they applied for their permit, had asked for 6 a.m. That was not allowed. It was permitted to be 8 a.m. We did respond at about 6:15. The music was stopped for a period of time, and then it went back in at 8 o'clock. We are reviewing that with our after-action report, and on November 8th, I will be giving you an overview of all the special events that have occurred so far up to this year as well. So we will be following up with that as well regarding that issue with the Mermaid event.
Great. I agree. It was a great event. I was down there for most of it, and except for the violation of their permit, I think 8 o'clock, the residents that I corresponded with said, yeah, 8 o'clock sounds about right. Yeah. And we appreciate you responding to that, Chief.
You betcha.
And there was also the email from the lady who couldn't get out of her driveway, but apparently you said that a reverse 911 call had gone out to everybody the day before.
We also sent out a Nixle alert, which goes over our Facebook page as well. And we're planning on incorporating all the special events that involve road closures in our website as well in the future, so that there'll be more ways that we can advise people.
I think they said they did let one person out and had to go somewhere, that the officers were accommodating.
The supervisor on scene that day did assist them in getting them out as well.
Yeah, that's good. That worked out.
Well, I know that some special events are required or by permits in various agencies to do actual door-to-door flyering of those kinds of travel inconveniences. Did we have that in our permit process for this particular event too?
Not a door-to-door solicitation, but we can look at incorporating something of that effect that would help notify residents as well.
People that are trapped by an event for a number of hours, yeah.
So it was all of Park Avenue?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, and all on the event though, Rudy, even the people who did minor complaining liked the event. You know, it was overwhelmingly supported by our community, I think. This was the second annual event. It was much better this year than it was last year. And I think we'll continue to work with the promoter to make sure we try and eliminate all the concerns.
And as the grandfather of a mini mermaid, there was a lot of excitement.
Okay.
It was a very exciting event.
Good.
Did it increase business in the village very much, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, that was kind of the starting point there and finish area, so I haven't gotten any feedback from that yet.
There were a lot of people in the village for a long time. It wasn't just hit and miss. Everyone stayed around for a long time.
I saw people in the restaurants. They looked pretty full.
Yes.
Okay, anything else, staff? Council? If I gave anyone out there the wrong impression thinking that I would rather be in Malibu than here, I apologize. I find that the approachability and friendliness of the people in Capitola head and shoulders above anyone who lives in Malibu. Good night, Capitola. I love you.